The Woods-Wise Callmasters present the Vocal Wildlife Series. The Woods-Wise Callmasters present Vocal Elk.
I just love it out here, the American West. And I think for most of you, when you think about the American West, you think about mountains, lots of open space, plenty of fresh air, and lots of wildlife. Personally, when I think about wildlife in western states, I think about elk. And I think about that for two reasons. Number one, elk, of course, is an extremely magnificent animal, but he's also very vocal. And because he's vocal, that makes him easy and fun to call up. Now, elk once were distributed from coast to coast throughout North America, but by the turn of the century, their numbers had dwindled down to just isolated pockets in a few western states. Thanks to the efforts of professional wildlife managers and through the support of the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, the elk has not only made a dramatic comeback here in the western states, matter of fact, such a strong comeback that it's not any longer an unusual sight to see elk. As a matter of fact, it's commonplace. And also, it's good news for those back east. Elk are actually being restored back in the eastern parts of the United States, and they're going to become more and more of a common sight back there. Now, elk, as I mentioned, are extremely vocal, and that makes them easy and fun to call up. In Vocal Elk, we're going to show you just how much fun you can have calling up elk.
Callmaster Jerry Peterson is an expert at teaching animal vocalizations to outdoorsmen. Elk calling is an area where Peterson excels. Jerry's research for vocal elk spans a 20-year period and led to the development of many new elk calls. Peterson's Wood-Wise calling strategies are based on his in-depth understandings of elk communication. His gift for teaching is apparent in Vocal Elk as he dissects elk language and develops an easy-to-follow video dictionary. Jerry's methods will translate into close-range call-ups of elk year-round. Callmaster veteran Norm Pint has been on the leading edge of elk calling for nearly 2 decades. Norm's depth of experience with elk behavior was instrumental in the development and field testing of the new Woods-Wise Hyper Hot Cow Call. Pint has worked with free-roaming elk herds in Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, and Colorado. Norm has instructed thousands of outdoorsmen with tested techniques for calling the big bulls into close range. Norm's high point is his ability to teach elk calling basics to beginners. The American elk is perfectly adapted for survival in North America. This large member of the deer family migrated onto our continent about 35 million years ago across the Bering Land Bridge, which once connected Siberia and Alaska. From Alaska, they dispersed across Canada and eventually throughout the American continent. Historically, their range extended as far east as present-day New Jersey and as far south as Louisiana. Elk are masters at surviving on the plains. They once shared the grasslands that also sustained the buffalo. Elk are both herd animals and grazers of the plains and meadows. Life on the open plains means that you are visibly exposed to predators. Elk are well adapted for dealing with predators. Unlike white-tailed deer, elk are excellent long-distance runners and can outrun most of their aggressors. Elk are herd animals. The herd gives elk a survival benefit. The inherent confusion created by a multiple-member band protects individuals from predation. There is safety in numbers. Bull elk are loners for much of the year. It isn't until their antlers shed their velvet in early fall that bulls leave the small summer bachelor groups and become free agents, searching for a receptive herd of cows and calves. Cow elk, on the other hand, never leave the security of the herd except for a short period during calving. Vocal communication among elk occurs year-round. The vocalizations convey needs and desires, or danger.
Do you want to be more effective at communicating with elk? Then just remember that elk communicate with each other by a basic group of sounds, and the way that they get across their needs and desires is by adding emotion and little inflections to the sound. In other words, how they say it is very important. Now, elk communicate with a variety of sounds, probably up to 25 or maybe more. But before that gets confusing to you, remember this. They basically only communicate with 5 basic sounds. They grunt, they chuckle, and more importantly, they bugle and mew, and they make a barking sound. Let me show you what I mean by the barking sound, because it's important that we get this one out of the way first. Sounds just pretty much like a dog barking. Now, the reason I say let's get this out of the way first is because that's a negative sound. It's not going to be a positive sound to attract elk to you. It's going to make them go on alert and probably run away from you. But understand this. Just like every other sound that we're going to demonstrate, how they say it's important. If they just bark once, that means, oh, that didn't look too good. Probably not a good thing over there, and they'll walk away from it. But boy, if they see something that's really bad, bark, bark, bark. They'll bark real often, and they'll walk away, and they'll bark every step of the way as they're leaving. So how they're saying it and how often they're saying it can add to the meaning that they want to get across. Now let's talk about a few of the basic important sounds that they make and how they make it. Let's take the mew, for example, as a very positive sound. It's probably the most positive sound that elk make. And both the bulls and the cows will make this sound, as well as the calves. This is an easy, relaxed sound. It says, everything's fine, I'm over here. This is your basic mew. It starts high and it just relaxes and goes down, and it's done real soft. When it's done soft, it's really indicating, boy, everything's okay, just like this. Now notice it's just a straight line, smooth drop. That says, boy, everything's just going along good here, and it's just great, everything's fine. Now, they get a little separated. Now they get a little bit worried, but they don't want to say things are going bad. They just want to keep in contact with each other. So they're going to up the volume and add a little emotion to it, just like this. Gets a little louder, a little more intense, and it gets across the point. Ooh, I want to have everybody over here, but it's okay. Now, you can take that same mew and add a little bit of emotion to it by making it rise and then fall, and that starts to say, whoops, things aren't too good. Remember this about elk sounds. If they start high and go low smooth, they're okay. But if you go low, high, low, then you start adding a different message altogether that's a little bit on the negative sound like this. So this is the alarm or alert mew. Hear the way it rises and then falls off? That's usually when they're gathering up and they're saying, come on over here, let's get out of here, it's not too good or it's time to go. So they're expressing another emotion. The same thing goes on with bugling. Basic contact bugle between bulls, the one that says, I'm over here, everything's okay, goes high to low. Shh. No emotion, no variation in it, and it's usually soft. Shh. Now, what do I mean by soft? You and I can hear it probably maybe under 100 yards sometimes. Real soft, low intensity stuff. In the case of a bugle, when they want to get more intense, it starts low, goes high, and falls off, just like the classic bugle, for example. They're adding a little more aggression to it that says, hey, back off, or trying to express that emotion of a little more aggression. So if you want to be more effective at talking with elk, remember they're expressing their basic needs and desires by adding emotion, volume, and intensity.
Daily elk movements are food-driven, and feeding destinations may vary from week to week. During the fall, bulls may accompany the herds, but they do not lead them. Bulls chase individual cows back into the herd, but the general movement from feeding meadows to bedding sites is controlled by the cows. This chasing by the harem bull is called herding, and is typified by the bull laying his antlers back and forcing the individual cow back into the group. During these daily treks back and forth between bedding and feeding, the bull is actually a follower, not a leader. Traveling herds may cover 5 miles one way between destinations, and may fan out considerably. Social vocalizations are used frequently at this time to maintain contact with herd members.
From the time the calves first hit the ground, they begin to learn the basics of their language. They need to do this so that they can keep up with the group. It's important for elk to be able to get up and be mobile right away. And the way that they stay together is through basic vocal communication. Those elk start going to elk kindergarten. And if you want to be successful at communicating with elk, it's important that you start your calling in elk kindergarten too. Basically, there's only two sounds that you need to be concerned with to become consistent at calling elk. The first sound is a come here type mew. It's basically saying the cow to the calf saying, Johnny, Johnny, and the calf answering back, here I am, and it's just these little mews that go back and forth. So, in kind of looking at that, keep in mind that in elk kindergarten, they're learning that these smooth sliding sounds are good sounds that says, Johnny, Johnny, Johnny. And in elk communication, it's this high to low thing. Meow, meow, meow. And then the lost sounds, Johnny, starts out medium, Johnny, and falls off at the end. Johnny. Then, the next phase is to learn all the alert and warning sounds. Now, alert sounds start out medium, go high, and then fall off. And they're real short and they're fairly loud. In other words, don't do that. This is bad. You got these little rises and feel like these are alerts, these are warnings. Watch out. And in the mews, they sound like this. Those are the alert mews. So by adding a little inflection, low, medium, medium, high, low, you get that watch out warnings. And then of course the all out warning that they all have to learn are the barks. Meow, meow, meow. And you'll notice these are deep, gravelly, throaty sounds. Every sound virtually in elk language that starts out, that gravelly quality is bad, negative. Meow, meow. Whether it's parts of bugling, whether it's parts of barks, or whatever. So every time you hit that low note, you're implying a warning or a threat. Get out of here, run away. If you want to be more effective at communicating with elk, the best place for you to start is in elk kindergarten, just like they do.
The breeding season in elk is back time so that the calves will be born at the optimum forage peak in the spring. This ensures ample nutrition for the cow's milk production, and the timing relates directly to calf survival. The breeding period, or rut, occurs during September across most of the North American elk range. This is a period when the intensity of elk vocalizations reach a crescendo. The period is hormone-driven, and all the breeding behaviors reach a new intensity. As cows come into estrus, bulls become more focused on their role of maintaining control over the cows they have been overseeing for the last month. The estrus scent that the cows now emit lures subdominant satellite bulls in close. The harem master must spend more of his time fending off newcomers and holding his established position as herd protector, overseer, and breeder. Cows are also more edgy now as hormones well up, and likewise they are more vocal. At this time of elevated social intensity, the bulls are extremely susceptible to a new elk call. Woodswise calls it the hyper-hot cow call. Look closely. The cow at the extreme right edge of the picture is making the call now.
You know, a couple of years ago, when we started hearing about guides down in the southwestern part of the country using a real excited cow call during the peak of the rut, and they started calling in these tremendous bulls. You know, I couldn't help but be a little bit skeptical. You know, you always hear about these things that come along all the time, and boy, they're going to be the newest and greatest and so forth. But you had the opportunity of working with this sound for a couple of years, and some of the stuff you were telling me was really significant. But kind of give a broad overview of maybe what we know about this versus maybe just trying to make speculation on it. One thing for certain, this particular sound seems to really work well during the rut, but it doesn't work well, say, in July or in April, and it doesn't work well in December. But boy, it sure seems to be what that bull wants to hear during the peak of the rut. At least it sure seems to be by the way it works.
That's what I found out, Jerry.
That's what it seems like. Now, you were telling me a story about what happened to you just last year with this thing.
Well, a friend and I were out last year, and I wasn't. I heard about this from a couple of the buddies, but this one particular friend went ahead and we got set up and made a call, and we called in 3 different bulls in 20 minutes.
3 different ones?
3 different bulls, and 2 of them were dandy bulls.
Same setup?
Same setup, and we never took one step. We were as close as you and I together the whole time.
3 different ones came in?
In a 20-minute period. We just kept calling.
Well, that's why we kind of call it a hyper-hot cow, because obviously it pushes that right button on the bull seemingly at the right time. Now, you told me about, you were telling a friend about it, and he'd never called up a bull?
That's right. Well, what I did first thing is I went on home and started playing around with various calls and so forth to develop this sound a little better than what he was doing at that time, and got to going out and calling and started calling in bulls regularly. So about, I'd say the first week or so, a friend I told him about it, and he was very interested, so he says, well, let's go out some of these nights. So we did. And after work, in an hour-and-a-half period, I taught him and showed him how to make the sound with my call on the pickup driving out there. We took 3 youngsters along, one of which was his own boy, and he did all the calling. I let him do all the calling that night. He called 4 mature bulls that one evening.
I mean, just within a matter of
We're
feet.
talking, and a call-in is 40, 50 yards.
Yeah. Oh, man, that's unbelievable. And with the kids sitting right there.
The kids were right there, and we tried huddling around a tree. It was crazy. And believe it or not, one of them came right out, a nice 6-point bull came right out of the herd from 250 yards out. I could see him. I put the glasses up and saw him and watched the reaction. And he came out of that herd all the way down to 22 yards. It was crazy.
Unbelievable.
Those kids were thrilled.
Well, and that's pretty much been the experiences, for everybody. Now, it's not a call that works all the time, but it seems to work only on the bulls and primarily only during the rut. So, what does a hyper hot cow sound like?
Well, to me, I've interpreted it as kind of a whiny, crybaby, spoilt brat type sound.
Demanding.
One that wants attention now. And
it's like everything other aspect of calling elk or whatever. It's the more emotion you put behind it, the more meaning it has.
Exactly.
Obviously, this being a hyper hot cow, that she's putting more emotion behind.
She's calling a little louder. She's calling much more often and almost continuous, and she's putting some whining and kind of a crying in there with it.
Well, show them what it sounds like. I think that's the best way to know it is to show it. Let's see it.
How's that?
Lots of emotion to it. Exactly what you'd expect. Whining,
Kind of
demanding, need.
Demanding, right? Yeah, and it sure seems to work.
Boy, I'll tell you what, I'm ready to get after it and can't wait for the peak of the rut to get here to give that a shot.
Yeah, it's a thrill.
In the development stage of the hyper-hot cow call, Norm Pint had dozens of close-range call-ups. The most dramatic were situations where he actually called a harem master away from his cows. Not only does Norm play the role of the Pied Piper on this next mega bull, but he fires him up enough to leave his harem and bugle within a stone's throw from Norm. Even after the bull gets suspicious, Norm was able to call him back with the hyper-hot cow call.
Man, there's been several times that huffing tipped me off the bull was coming in. This guy must have run halfway up the backside of the mountain to get up here. Once he's within 100 yards, you don't want to call very much. Just enough to hold his interest if you have to do any at all. This guy's pretty interested. Starting to get antsy. Look at that. Even when his common sense says something's wrong here and I better get out. He just can't resist. He's got to come over and have another look. Just seemed to calm him right down. You know, with a regular cow call, big bull like this would just run in, take that quick look, and just go ahead and turn around and run out of there just like he was going to. But boy, when he heard that hyper hot call, stopped him. He's just got to find that hot cow. You'd never get him to hold this long, not with a regular cow call. Look at that. He still says, I'm here. I'm right here. Come to me. I'll walk around and get another look. He figures that cow's got to be up there behind the brush or something. Yeah, that's another nice thing about the Woods-Wise Hyper Hot cow. It's loud. Not only is it good holding call like this, but it also works long distances. Lets you cover a lot of ground fast. Also works as a good locator call. If you get one to sound off, then you can move in and set up on them. He just refuses to believe there's not a cow here. Back for another look. Yeah, I think he's getting a little suspicious now. You know, probably 90% of the call-ups last less than a minute. This one's been going on almost 9 minutes now. That is really cool. This is what you call a close encounter. Yep. Good job, Norm. Good job. Well, let's let him walk. Maybe we can go find another one.
So hyper-hot cow call sure sucked that booger down here to about 15 yards. Yeah. I can still see him down there.
The best way to become familiar with elk language is to spend a lot of time in elk country next to elk. The second best way to master elk language is to spend time with Callmaster Jerry Peterson.
As bulls mature, they begin to develop very specialized vocalizations of their own. In addition to the basic elk language that all elk share in common, bulls begin to develop variations on bugling. And these variations have specific meanings. They also run a wide range of emotions and different types of messages that they're trying to convey with these bugling sounds. These types of sounds will range from sociable, non-aggressive types of bugles to slightly aggressive or alert types of things to all-out, full-blown, aggressive types of sounds. Now, the easy way to remember this progression and to remember each and every one of these different types of bugle sounds is to remember this key phrase, cats roar. Cats stands for the first letters of each of the sounds, and the roar stands for the rut roar. Now, here's how it breaks out. The first level, the C part of cat's roar, is for the contact or non-aggressive come here type of bugling that one elk will bugle to get the other elk to let them know I'm over here, and not as a threatening type of thing. And just like the contact mew, it starts high and drops low, and it doesn't have a lot of swing in it. There's no emotion to it, and there's no tough bottom on it, no at the end. And you'll notice it doesn't have a lot of emotion in it. It's also fairly soft. It's not given with a lot of intensity like the more threatening types of bugles. Now the next level is the attention type of a bugle, and it starts to pick up that rise and fall, similar to the attention type of mew. It puts an alert out kind of thing, like, oh, I see something, or I didn't like that. And it starts out one level, rises a little bit, and then has a distinct at the end. You see you got that like that. Now the next level are the threats. Now the threat type of bugles would be classified as the classic type of bugle. It starts out with a deep low growl and then steps up several notes very often to a sustained high note and then drops to a distinct And these types of bugles also include the chuckling that very often accompanies the latter part of the bugle, and they would sound something like this. So you got the classic types of bugling. The next would be the screams. Now the screams is the S part of the cat's abbreviations, and the screams would replace the and the chuckling. In other words, they start out with a growl and they rise in pitch, and then they drop down into a instead of the and it's just emphasizing that growl. It starts to pick up part of that bark type of deep throat like that. And you're just about at the point where it crosses over into the classic rut roar. Now, the word rut in Old English actually means roar. So that's where the word rut comes from. And elk, especially the dominant bulls, do a roaring sound instead of the bugling. Very often they won't even have a bugle note in front of it. It'll start out with maybe a short whistle, but very often it's just the type of rut roar. So there you have it. A specialized sound that only the bulls make that's based on bugling, and it's built around the phrase cat's roar.
Scent plays an important and strategic role in the social lives of many animals. Few animals are more scent-oriented than elk. Bull elk undergo a complex series of behaviors that are related to their dominance in a group. These often involve scent display. Bull elk urine is used primarily to advertise stature, virility, and self-confidence. Bulls have the ability to regulate and direct the stream of urine onto specific parts of their bodies. Most often they fan spray their bellies, but often they concentrate the urine stream forward, lower their neck, and spray and soak their long neck manes with the pungent fluid. This behavior is directly connected with antler rubbing on trees, where they then rub their urine-soaked manes on the trees they have mangled. These rubbing sequences last for a long time. This sequence you're viewing lasted over 22 minutes. Bull urine is also sprayed freely while in close association with the harem of cows. This odor confirms the bull's self-confidence to the cow. Confidence spraying and scenting usually occurs simultaneously with the culminating staccato-like chuckle that often punctuates the end of a bugling sequence.
The mouth diaphragm call, one of the best calls to master because it frees your hands up. Now, this diaphragm, first of all, let me explain exactly what a diaphragm call is. Basically, all it is one or more little latex strips, reeds that are stretched across a frame, and then they're covered with tape. And each has a function, but of course the sound is actually coming from these latex reeds vibrating. Now, in order to get the sound out of the diaphragm, you need to know where it goes in your mouth, and this will take just a little bit of getting used to, but really if you'll master this, you'll find it quite easy.
basically getting it in the right place and using your tongue correctly is the only tricky part about mastering the diaphragm call. Now, here's how and where you put it in your mouth. Let's say my hand, the outside of my fingers, represents my teeth in the upper part of my mouth, okay? This is the front of my mouth, this is my back of my mouth or my throat. Now you'll notice that tape is filling up and against the roof of my mouth and also on either side against the gums of my teeth. That keeps it keeps air from leaking in around the diaphragm call so that the air will go right across those reeds and make it vibrate. Now you'll notice it's back a little ways from the front and it's in there real tight. Now the other part of mastering the diaphragm is how your tongue fits in there. Now, everybody knows when you stick your tongue out, you can stick it out and actually outside of your mouth, but also you can shorten it up inside of your mouth. And when you do, the back or heel of your tongue widens out and it fills the back part of the top of your mouth. And that's the secret right there. Shorten your tongue up, and then the heel of your tongue is pressing right against the back of that frame and filling the whole space between your teeth. And now that'll allow you to blow air across the top of your tongue, make those reeds vibrate, and then use the pressure from the heel of your tongue to change the pitch in the call. More pressure makes the pitch go higher, less pressure makes it deeper and deeper in tone. Now, here's how you put the whole bugling sequence, let's take bugling as an example, together. To start out with the growl at the beginning of the bugle, you start out by loose tongue pressure, and you're going to hiss like a snake to make the air go across your tongue, like that, right? Little light pressure, and that'll make it rumble, and add in the growl with your own vocal cords. Hear that? That's going to give you the growl or at the beginning. Then press in with your heel of your tongue. That'll start the pitch to rise. Make the whistling notes as you go higher. More pressure, the higher you go. And then the end, you'll drop your tongue and go. Add that with your voice. Over and over again, and you got the chuckle. So when you put it all together, this is what you'll get. One last little piece of advice. This is truck practice, guys. Don't do this around the house or you'll get thrown out.
Another unique bull behavior that involves scent display is an action called wallowing. These wallows may be used day after day. Here, a bull urinates into a wet depression, usually containing standing water. Bulls then endeavor to coat their bodies with the urine-scented water and mud. Sometimes they paw the water and splash themselves with the concoction. Other times they rake the moist grass and mud with their antlers and splash their bodies and coat the antlers with the confidence scent. Other times they get down and ugly and roll and wallow in the stinky mud bath until they turn black. The frequency with which a bull scent marks rub trees, wallows, urine sprays his belly and neck, and bugles demonstrates his level of confidence in himself as a dominant bull. This display impresses the cows and helps him maintain a position as harem master.
You don't know, one thing when you're out here calling elk, that elk's out there surviving day in and day out. And the way that wild elk, wild animals of all types survive is they're always using their senses. They're using their eyes and their ears, and probably more important than anything else, they're using their nose. Right. Now, in order to be successful at calling, you first have to know where the wind is blowing. Mm-hmm. In this case, it's kind of drifting back this way, and my scent is just like, well, shifted back a little bit. See, the powder bottles tell you that type of thing. This is an unscented powder, and it tells you exactly where your body odor is going. Now, it's going back a little bit this way. That powder is just like my odor. Wherever that wind carries that powder is where my scent is going. Right. And if an elk is downwind and he catches a snoot full of that kind of concentration of my scent,
he's never coming my way.
Gone.
There's no way you're going to, you got to fool all three of his senses.
Right.
If you only fool two, chances are you'll never get him close. If you don't fool his nose, you're not going to get him there. Now, the second sense would be his hearing. Of course, you got to be quiet, but the calls will help me fool his hearing. So now I've got two things beat. I've got his nose beat because the wind is carrying my scent away from him. I want to be sure that he's coming in from upwind and I'm downwind and my scent is going further downwind away from him. And I can fool his senses of hearing with a call, make him think that there's elk there and he wants to come over there and look at it. But Norm, how am I going to fool his eyesight? If I set up, he's going to know right where that call comes from, isn't he?
That's right. What you do, Jerry, is just make a setup right here in a place like this where you've got a tree where if he's real close, you've got some protection. Then you got to live with it. But if he bugles off 400 or 500 yards or so, you can move on up to another object that's big that will hide your body and make another call.
In other words, it's probably best not just to stay where you are.
Right, it's better to move because the first time you made this sound, he thinks that cow is over there in that area. So if you cut off to the side or move forward, the forward is good because he thinks that you're another cow and you're moving up to him.
Coming to him. Yeah, he's calling you to come to him. So.
Right, and then a lot of times he'll be more aggressive and bugle bigger, and now he's kind of thrilled about it. And you'll realize how far he is away, and you'll know whether you should move up again or move again if you make another call.
In other words, it's not good to make one big move to where he is.
That's right.
You're going to want to move up in short increments.
You need to go a maximum of about a third of the way to him because he's a faster mover than you are.
Right.
See?
Right.
And so he can be halfway. And if you go halfway and he goes halfway, and you know what's going to happen. He's going to see you and poof, he's gone.
You're going to be caught moving, and
Right.
then he knows the jig is up. In other words, you didn't fool his eyes.
That's right. You goofed on the eye department.
Okay, but let's say then you've done your calling and you move forward. Usually when an elk comes to you, he's going to come maybe 75 yards from there, and then he's going to expect to see this cow. Or
cow.
If you're sounding like a cow and it's a bull looking for that cow, that's a big animal, and it's pretty hard to hide. In open country like this, it's real hard to hide. So he's going to stand off there probably, 80, 100 yards?
80, 100 yards, especially in a country like this, because he can see, my gosh, 150 yards almost right here, as open as this is.
So the trick is then he knows exactly where that call came
That's
from.
right.
Right?
That's right.
So you move forward, he comes up and says, you ought to be right over there by that bush.
That's right. He's not looking for you behind that tree right there close. And you get a bird's eye view right
there.
there.
You are broadside to him right here, and his whole attention's focused down there. You fooled his eyes.
You fooled his eyes.
Well, it also makes sense then for two guys to do this, right?
It does. Much better.
Let's go over here to these trees and see if we can't set up and show how two people can do this and never move, stay in one place maybe.
All right, let's do it.
So anyway, here are the elements of the two-man system. First of all, you want to have one man forward, and the guy that's going to do the calling, in this case I'm going to go do the calling, you want to have him further back. Now, basically, in open country like this, you'd probably want to be at least 50 yards, right?
Right.
But 80 or even 100 yards wouldn't hurt him.
It'd be better as open as this is.
Right. Well, anyway, there's a tree right back here. It's about 50 yards, got good cover. I'm going to set up there just to show them how it works for me being back there. But show them how they can hide right out here in the wide open spaces with just that one tree.
Right. Okay. First thing you do is pick a tree at minimum of this size. Your body can be hid behind this tree. I'm going to show you how I do it. Another thing that's very important is to pick a shady area. You get out in the sunshine and you just stick out like a sore thumb. But back in the shade, not moving, you'll get away with much, much more. Now I'm going to slip around behind here, and we're going to pretend there's an elk coming right off across through here. And I'm going to show you how you can kind of stay behind this tree and not be shown. You want to keep your body, your arms fairly close. You don't have to be real close to the tree to be hid. You can just put one eyeball behind that tree like that, and slowly as the bull comes down the line, start moving around. Now something you have to be very careful of is not sticking your head out behind like that, making a big old flash. Camouflage darn sure would help. And you want to be very careful so you don't throw your elbows out, or if you got a leg out and all of a sudden you have to decide you might be seen by the leg, you pull the leg in. You just can't be sticking your head's way out and jerking an arm or leg in because it's going to be seen. Look at the difference. Okay? As that bull's coming down the line, you can watch the head and the eyes for a little while, and when he gets too close, then you move to a little bit further and come out from behind the tree like this, and then you start watching just the rump patch. because then if you see in the rump patch, you know his eyes are right behind this tree here, and he can't pick you up. And you very slowly move around the tree, stand just watching his rump patch move, and you know you're going to be in safe shape. And you'll get a bird's eye view all the way, because he's focused down there on Jerry. That's where you think the sound's coming from.
This particular morning, Norm Pint and I decided to set up in a thick bedding area to get out of the wind. When you set up in this kind of an area, you want to set up about 40 yards apart. It's important to remember in close cover that you're going to have to call them in closer before you see them. That's Norm back there in the back doing the calling. That's me on the right, standing there next to the tree. Well, here we are under 25 yards. And that cow doesn't have a clue that I'm here. She's totally focused back there on Norm. All I gotta do is just keep easing around the tree. Just keep that tree between me and her. She doesn't have a clue. Not a clue that I'm over here. Looks like she's gonna try to get downwind. That's gonna be trouble. Same old dance. We'll just ease around, keep the tree between us. Uh-oh. Downwind. Here it comes. Yep. Game over. Oh well, that was fun anyway. Unbelievable.
Yeah, that's what we're looking for. If you're out scouting, this is what you want to pay close attention to. This is a very typical rub of a very mature bull elk. Only the bigger bulls will take a tree this size and rake it and tear it up like this. What they'll do is also urinate on their mane and their front body area, and they'll rub their neck on that, and boy, you can smell that. It's just strong as could be. But look for lots of these in one given area. There's a road right here, and anytime you're driving down the road, sometimes 30, 40 mile an hour, if you're paying attention, you can see rubs like this and start spending some time in that area. Now sometimes you'll find limbs that'll come out over the top on a pine tree, and what they'll do is they'll reach, the bigger bulls especially, will reach way up in here and break and just shred these limbs that stick out. They won't do a lot of this typical rubbing here. They'll do that an awful lot on cedar branches sticking out. They also use trees that are probably, 30 inches in diameter, and they'll make a ring around there, and you'll find in the pine needle and so forth, just a ring around where they'll urinate all around that area. That's more or less a scent post that will tell all the cows in the area when they come through that that's his territory. And what they'll do is they'll hang and mingle in that area, kind of waiting for him. Okay, now sometimes what they'll do is take a tree like this right here, and they'll just shred this tree. Now this bull was in this area, he broke a few branches off, but many times you'll find it just shredded to pieces. This is what you look for when you're out scouting. Spend some time in that area. Good luck.
The most common sign left by elk are tracks. They tell you exactly where the elk are traveling. This information can help you choose an area where you can be successful in calling.
That's a dandy. That's a dandy bull here. Look, you can see the dew claw showing real good on that print. What you always like to see is that real sharp point of the toe. And back there, now, you know, with cattle, those dew claws are up real high.
Yeah.
And another thing about a cattle track is, it tends to be more like this.
Rounded,
blocky,
blockier.
Rounded on the end and square and a little bit wider.
Right.
Than that. Of course, it'll have.
And a lot of times these are a little bit behind. One side or the other is a little bit shorter.
Yep. Yeah, like on this one. Usually on the outside track or on the inside track, it's been worn down a little bit more inside the track. Now look up there.
Yeah, there's a dandy mature cow there and her calf.
Here's something to think about. Now here you've done all this great calling, and you're well concealed, got your camouflage on, you're set up right, and the game comes in and it swings downwind of you, and all of a sudden, boom, it's gone. What happened? Well, here's what happened. Your scent, your body odor, the odors that you know, of your clothing and all the stuff that you're bringing with you is drifting downwind with the wind, and when that animal smells it, it doesn't belong there, he knows it's danger, and boom, they're gone. Well, how can you control this? Well, there's some new products out on the market, and it's real. Here's something that I find real interesting. This is one of the newest things that's come along in a while. It's called a scent lock suit, and let me show you how it works here. It's actually two different pieces of fabric, both of them extremely lightweight, and there's little beads of charcoal throughout the whole thing. And the way that works is that charcoal works like a filter that picks up all of your odor molecules. In other words, your body's giving off this odor and perspiration too, and it's picking it up and it's collecting it inside those little pieces of charcoal. And it'll hold it there, and the way you reactivate the charcoal is you simply throw it in the dryer. It's really a neat product. Now here's how it works. I've got a pair of pants and I've got a shirt on, and they're underneath my camouflage. And it's busy there picking up all the odor that I'm giving off and holding it right there in the suit and not getting it out in the air. But obviously you're going to have some leaks. Now they make gloves and they make a head mask, but you're going to have some areas where you've got to also control your odor. Now this is a Woods Wise Scent Eliminator, and you can spray that on your boots and on your hat. I like to use it inside my hat and on the outside. And this likewise picks up the scent and holds it. And it'll keep it from getting airborne and spreading downwind. Now, here's another thing that you can use. After you shower, take your bath, you can use this Odor Master deodorant. Now, what this does is this isn't your regular deodorant. What this actually does is it controls the bacteria. Now, for those of you that may not be aware, it's actually the bacteria that gives the human body odor. Now, it's a cream, and the way you use this is you simply take some with your finger and apply it to your underarms, on your feet, other places where it's moist. Moisture is where bacteria lives best. And obviously if you can control the bacteria, you're going to control a large source of the odor that you give off as a human. Now, obviously you can do all of that scent control, but there's still going to be a factor out there. Animals' noses are a lot more sensitive than yours and mine, and no matter what you do to control it, you can certainly lower your profile, but you'll never control all of it. Now, obviously then what you have to do is work the wind to your advantage. Now this is arrow dust. It's an unscented powder, and the way you use it is you just simply pump it out there in the air, and it tells you where your scent's going and where that wind is going to carry your scent. So Pay attention to not only controlling your scent at its source, but also where your scent's going with the wind.
Bull elk grow impressive antlers each year and shed them each winter. These antlers convey a number of messages to cow elk and also serve as a tool used in establishing dominance among other bulls. Large body size and symmetrical, well-developed antlers is an indication that a particular bull would be a genetically sound choice to father offspring. Cow elk actually choose the bull whose harem they will be a part of. Therefore, the burden of proof of virility is on the shoulders of the bull. Bulls use these antlers and brute strength to ward off and intimidate other bulls from harassing the cows in the harem. Cows acknowledge his presence as a protector more than an oppressor. The herd bull keeps immature bulls away from the cows in his harem. These subdominant bulls pester and harass the cows on a full-time basis if the cow herd is not being overseen by a mature bull. Cows know this and choose to be with an impressive antlered bull. The dominant bulls constantly demonstrate, exhibit, and advertise their commitment to the cows in the harem by a vocalization called bugling. The herdmaster's bugle is interpreted by the cows as a comforting proclamation that says, "I'm here. I'm big, I'm bad, and I'll protect you." His bugle can also convey warning to the other competing bulls in the vicinity. Antlers are also used in battles. Sometimes a challenging bull will risk injury in order to gain control of another bull's harem. These battles are closely watched by the cows in the harem. In the end, they will choose to be with the victor.
You know, one of the questions I hear most is, what's it like to call up an elk? You know, everybody says, well, you know, I see some of this stuff and I hear about bugling and everything else, and aren't they all supposed to come in just mad and bugling and tearing up and just snorting and carrying on and raking up trees? And boy, you know, you always hear about the one that wants to come in there and just stomp you into the ground. Isn't that the way elk calling is supposed to be?
We'd all like to have it work out like that, Jerry, but it doesn't.
It doesn't. That only happens during that peak rut, and only on just a few of those bull elks when you bugle at them.
That's right.
Well, you know, tell them, give these people an idea of what a real call-up is probably like most often.
Well, that's the kind we'd like to have, but it don't happen very often. And when it does, it's basically in the rutting season. But if you were out calling, and you would be using more of the real subtle calls, and of course that would be the mew more than likely. And any elk out there is apt to respond to it at any given time of the year, because they're very social and they want company a lot.
In other words, they don't just stop communicating just because the rut's not done.
That's
right?
for sure.
You know,
that's for sure.
People have that idea that you know that the only way you can call them up is during the rut.
No, wrong. And of course, we want to call in cows and everything when we're just out there enjoying wildlife.
Sure.
And the more subtle you can make the calls, the better luck you'll have. Because if you try getting real aggressive, something's wrong. Because a cow does not call in other elk by just being real aggressive and do a lot of calling off rut periods of time.
Well, they're peaceful. They're a group. They're you know, they want to be with other elk that are relaxed and so forth. And so their off rut season type of calling is really low key.
Right.
You know, what kind of sounds? What are you looking for when you set up? What do you hear? What do you look for? What do you see?
Well, of course, when the woods is quite thick, you can't see very far. So you have to pay real close attention to all your noises, of course. A lot of times you'll hear a hoof kick a rock and tumble it over, and you get a clicking sound. Sometimes you'll hear a snap, and it just kind of sounds like this. And you have to be looking in that area, and pretty soon, just sure as a dickens, you'll see a leg move or something, and pretty soon an elk will mature.
A little flash of color.
Yeah, you can look for that color of the rump. It's real beigey, and it shows up real well down through the trees.
Yep. Especially when you're in an evergreen setting, and all of a sudden here's a little patch of tan moving through. Sticks out. You might just see the legs up under the under the lower canopy.
And then you start looking, you say, well, hey, 2, 3, my gosh, oh, it's a nice bull. And you might even be in the velvet. That would be a real thrill. See a nice bull in the velvet.
Sometimes on the other side, you may just get a soft call.
Right.
You just might hear a little mew or a little type of huff. Boy, sometimes all you hear is. One time when I called up a bull elk, they make a tending sound. And it's just like a little ticking, you know?
Right.
And it sounded just like a watch. It was so rhythmic. It's tick, 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 tick. You know, elk have kind of a throwback. They have these tusks in their teeth. They used to have tusks probably like a pig, and they'd pop them. And what they would do is pop, pop, pop as a tending thing to scoot the cows along, and they still do that today. It's kind of a throwback.
Right.
You were telling me about some other sound that you've heard bull elk make when they come in.
Well, they make a sound that sounds like a dog that shakes his head real quick, and the ears flop together. It's kind of a popping sound. I can't really duplicate it. I've heard it, and I recognize it all the time. But it's really a neat sound, and you know the animal's there.
Once you've heard it, and I know exactly what you're telling me, you always remember. It's very difficult, but the dog ear flop is kind of the best thing, but it also has a very sharp click to it at the same time.
Right.
It's kind of, you know, but when you hear it, you know it.
You'll know it. You'll never forget it.
And it's those subtle sounds. It might just be heavy breathing or huffing, twig snap, a step in the leaves, or the crunch in the gravel. But that's what you're listening for. It may not always be a vocal response. If you'll pay attention to those details, you'll be more aware, and you'll be able to actually see the elk that you call up.
So there you have it, vocal elk. If you enjoy calling wildlife as much as I do, look for the entire Vocal Wildlife series from the Woodswise Callmasters. Get out there and start calling elk.
For more information on the Woodswise Vocal Wildlife Series and wildlife calls, ask for the Micromag Call Catalog. Call 1-800-735-8182. Sportsmen can ask for the Woodswise Hunting Products Catalog. Call 1-800-735-8182.